I'd like to first introduce, and if they'll indulge me, I'm going to introduce them all at one time and then maybe ask them to make a few opening comments. But our first panelist is Jim Richardson. Jim is the Senior Vice President of Forest City Enterprises. That might be the firm that you're the least familiar with, although they have a history here in Atlanta and throughout the country. But Forest City, based in Cleveland, has been associated with a lot of the large-scale redevelopment projects that have happened around the country. And Jim actually heads all of that work in terms of development, construction, entitlement, zoning, et cetera. I think Jim's background maybe started off in retail and a lot of pieces and of commerce and office and retail, but over time he has a wide portfolio of housing, of office, of parking, and I think most importantly he has a wealth of experience in and is helping shape federal policy and national policy related to transportation and particularly transit-oriented development. Then also we have Egbert Perry, who's the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Integral Group. Homegrown company here that's a holding company for a wide range of companies that does all aspects of program management, construction, and development and finance. Egbert has been known, I think, throughout this city as one of the most compassionate development leads who has helped transform several communities throughout Atlanta. But it's not just in Atlanta, and it's although he is well known for his affordable housing, Integral has been successful in multi-use projects around the country. Egbert serves on numerous boards. He's a part-time scratch soccer player, I think, still. But I think as evidence of how involved Egbert is in this community, he just finished being on the board of directors for the Federal Reserve of Atlanta. He's currently on the boards of Fannie Mae, the Atlanta Life Financial Group, the University of Pennsylvania's alma mater, Children's Healthcare, and the planned National Center for Civil and Human Rights. So finally is John McCall, who's Executive Vice President of Cousins Properties. Cousins, as most folks know, have left their imprint on Atlanta for decades. And they have been a major player and a major leader in downtown as well, and a wide range of work. John particularly has a background in business and development, helps lead a lot of their real estate efforts, including, which I think is going to be important here, he has a lot of experience with institutional partners, including Emory, I know the University of North Carolina Foundation he's working with now, so kind of that public-private partnership and where you bring a lot of players together. John also is very involved in Atlanta. He's a member of the 2001 Leadership Atlanta class, the Midtown Community Improvement District, and he's also the Director and Treasurer of Sheltering Arms Early Education and Family Centers, Chairman of the Atlanta Police Foundation, Director and Vice Chairman of Georgians for Passenger Rail, and a host of other organizations, which all these gentlemen, you will see in their passion and commitment, are very involved in the communities they work in. And Jim, if you have not seen him on the street, you will know that Atlanta is already his second home. So I appreciate you letting me get through all that, and I appreciate the panel letting me give a little bit of background. But I thought I might ask each of you all to make just a little bit of introductory comments, starting with Jim. Maybe, Jim, a little bit on your perspective about what this project is.
Well, thank you. But before I get started, I'd like to just introduce 4 people here and have them stand up that's actually working with me on the project here locally, and that's David. Please stand up. Abbas and Adi. And then Carmen, back in the back there. So if any questions, they know everything about it, so go ask them and don't come me. But anyway, what I'd like to do is talk about and go back this couple hundred years type thing. And long ago, our nation created the best freight and passenger rail system in the country. And when that happened, and as that happened, they were trying to figure out how to get around the mountains. And they eventually did, and that's how the Gulch got formed. And what it did was actually connect Atlanta to the nation, and I'd much rather say it connected the nation to Atlanta itself. And it's just the freight and passenger and just how we spread and grew as a nation was very important to our economy. And then the highway system came. And somebody says we'd need to build this big highway system. And they said the same thing when they first started to do that, is where's this highway going to connect to? It's the same thing we're starting to hear kind of now where they're saying, well, where's the high-speed rail going to connect to, and how are we going to connect all this, the passenger rail and everything? Well, they did that back in those days, and they created the highway system. They actually built the first highway in Kansas, and it went nowhere. But eventually, we saw what happened, that we connected the nation to this great highway network. And as we did that, then the suburbs got created. And as the suburbs got created, the cities got abandoned. And you know, the jobs still stayed in the city somewhat, but everybody went out in suburbs, lived, and abandoned the cities, basically. In Europe, and as Europe was, as we were doing our highway system, Europe focused on their passenger rail, and Asia, and they actually created the best passenger rail in the world. But they have a terrible freight system. And today they're trying to build their freight system, and we're trying to build our passenger rail system today. And so it's interesting how we viewed it and how the nations grew and Europe grew and Asia grew. So it really came down to, and as we did our highways and everybody expanded and all this, we created the word congestion. And to give you a little background on congestion, we all look at it with the automobile, and we look at it with the semi-truck that's in front of us that tries to cut us off on the highway, et cetera. But one thing people like to have understand is the fact of how much freight's got to be moved in this country for everybody to survive for a year. I mean, it takes about 70 tons of freight per person in this country on an average, on a per year basis, from everything you use, from your clothes to your food to everything that's shipped from products and everything else. And in the next 20 to 30 years, there'll be 20 to 30 more million people. And if you multiply that number out, you're talking now 2 billion to 3 billion tons of freight that's going to need to get moved. And so we need to do a couple things here. We need to protect and work with our freight companies. They are private companies, and they do look for ways to make money. And we need to figure out how we can incorporate our passenger rail system and create a new way of living. With congestion, gas prices, and everything going, airways, I mean, we can't expand airports that much more. We can't expand the highways that much more without great expense. And that's why we see how Europe is very successful with their passenger rail, and how we now need to adopt that and create a system across this country that can actually truly work. And I think we can all get together on that and work on that. We'll create what we're going to create here in Atlanta. And that is this MMPT station that's right in the Gulch area. Like Stan said, it's going to have all forms of transportation. It will connect Atlanta regionally, locally, and to cities across the nation, and provide a new way of living. And what I'd like to just end with that is, you know, Atlanta and Georgia has always led the nation in transportation, and I think it's time again to do that. And this project can be very significant in the country today, as other cities are looking to build these multimodal stations.
Thanks, Jim. Egbert, would you like to offer a few opening comments?
Yes, and let me say, Stan, I appreciate you calling me homegrown. You can tell my strong Georgia accent. So.
Oh, that was so dangerous. That was just so dangerous. I was getting ready to go there.
You know, sorry. For those of you who visit the Northeast, and I lived in the Northeast for a number of years, you could get on a train in Connecticut, and you could work in D.C., and you could make that trek every day very comfortably. You spend an hour and a half on the train, read the paper, prepare for your meetings, go to work, get back on the end of the day, and go back. And you have just traversed a number of states. Well, that's what makes the Northeast competitive. They have those investments. We have a slightly different challenge here. We are separated by large distances that we have to find a way to close. And we're the generation that is moving from living on farms or large estates, trying to get smaller and smaller and more cost conscious and use resources more effectively. Well, if you fast forward, our children and their children will be walking the way people in the Northeast walk today. because we old folks will be gone on, and that new generation wants to live in places that are alive and full of energy, where you can walk the streets and anything you want, you can get within walking distance. So while many of us relate to this as a multimodal project, that's a piece of what it is. The other thing that it is an opportunity to create one of those great destinations, and Gerald talked about it when he made his opening remarks. GDOT and many of the stakeholders are comfortable doing transportation projects, but transportation tends to mean roads. We have an opportunity at this site to leverage the fact that it's 119, 120 acres, to take that critical mass and create a destination that marries together effectively both the transportation modes that come together and this sense of place or destination that we can create. So the other thing that this does, given the size of the site, it provides us an opportunity to connect, knit together, or bring together the south, the west, the east, and push north in growing our urban core. So we're creating an urban core that's more friendly and compatible with the interests and lifestyles of that next generation. We, as a company, have historically done a lot of transformational projects. So we major in transformations. And Integral and Cousins, we have tremendous local knowledge, tremendous experience, but Forest City was an important part of our team. And one could ask, why would we need another party at the table, given the size and scale of projects we've done? And the answer is simple. We don't have transit in the Southeast. We certainly don't have transit in Atlanta. So we needed a member of the team that has done transit and done it successfully, and there's no team member possible anywhere in the States that would be better than Forest City. So that's how the core master development team came together. One of the things we expect to do with this project is create markets and demand that are not obvious. So if you think about transformational projects, what they do is the following. You're looking at a site, and if you did a market study, it will tell you there's no demand for this, there's no demand for that product, there's no demand for that product, because they're taking an assessment of what's there. What we hope to do with this project is create a destination that demand that is not obvious comes to life or surfaces. So this is very much about a catalytic development that's going to be transformational. So that's the lens, at least I look through as I think about this project.
My opinion, and it fits in with sort of, as all of us you'll hear, is that this is my version of when we were sitting around saying, okay, what is this project? And very much like it's transformational. If you think about a city and how it grows and how it's built over time, it's very much like the old activity of building a quilt. And you know, the city of Atlanta forgot a portion of its quilt, and it's that Gulch. And we actually tried to fix it by building viaducts and some other roads way up above all the existing roads. And what's kind of fun is to actually go down to the original road beds and walk around and see what life was like before they made that decision. And so I call it sort of the re-knitting of our city. And somebody said, well, so you think we're going to fill in the quilt? And I said, yes, we're going to fill in the quilt. And you know, roads are kind of like the stitching point when you're stitching little small blocks together. And so if you just visualize city blocks being stitched together with roads and other modes of transit and transportational activities, that's what we see this as. But what you got to remember is what is around the Gulch. You know, it's a divide of our city. And so you've got a very successful areas all around our city. Down urban core, you've got the government district, that already is quite prosperous and very active and alive, but it sort of hits a break at the Gulch. And then you have Castleberry Hill, you have Vine City, and you have the Dome World Congress Center area. And all of these things have their own sort of little life, but they're not connected. And you know, what we hope, as Egbert articulated much better than I will, is to pull that all together and to create the energy that happens when those elements all come together through a project and through the overall development of an environment at the street level and also at the services that'll be there. And you know, I personally see this as a decision by the state, which I'm very proud that we're making. Both the state and the other stakeholders making a decision very much like the other transformational decisions that we made, like the airport decision, like the decision to go after and win the Olympics and put that on and to make ourselves a world-class city. Well, we hadn't gotten there yet. You know, we're still chasing that dream of being a full-class, world-class city. Every other world-class city has a transit hub. We don't. Every other major country has a transit hub. We don't. And so what I hope this does is give us all, not change our lifestyle, but enhance our lifestyle both locally right around the project, but really give folks who the opportunity to choose where they want to live and provide that connectivity and that place of connection so that if somebody wants to live in, as Egbert said, Connecticut, well, let's say they want to live in Augusta or Macon or Chattanooga. Now, that's getting a little further out, so let's put it in real context. Let's say they want to live in Loganville or Stone Mountain, and they want to go to work. You know, anywhere like that, that's what we're talking about. You can choose where you live, but we're going to make it easier over time. It takes time. This is not something that's going to happen tomorrow. It will take time. But this is a transformational decision for a transformational project that we will gain benefits from economically over the next 30 to 50 years, much like the airport. And I think it's important that we all realize that. And what is that environment? It's walking street life. It's activities in and around where you live and where you can work. And as Egbert said, within walking distance, you can get what you need and what you want. Why are we doing this? Why is Cousins involved? As Stan mentioned, our history as a company of 50 some odd years here in Atlanta. We started as a home builder, but what are building homes is really building communities. And we still believe ourselves as building communities. And even when we build and develop an office building, that's a community of office workers. A retail center is a community gathering spot where people will come and shop and talk to each other and interact. Housing will be an important component of this. This is just two photographs of two buildings that we own in downtown Atlanta. We came back to downtown Atlanta in 2007. We bought and moved our company headquarters here back into the city of Atlanta purposefully, because we believe in putting our roots in the heart of the city and becoming an active member and an active part of what's going on in our city. So we're excited about the team we have put together, all of the consultants that are on this team. We're very excited about the opportunity in front of us to help and work with everybody in the community to make this a great project. So thank you.
Well, thanks. You all can see both my excitement to be part of this team and my challenge tonight physically to keep us moving. And we want to hear from you all. So there's going to be we want to make sure we have plenty of time for you all, both with the panel, but particularly with all the members of the team, with the exercises we'd like to do at the end. And so juices hopefully are starting to flow. If you start to have a question for the panel, what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you don't mind, just try to flag somebody with a name tag, and we've got a form. If you would write down your question, they'll get them all to me, and then maybe I can help facilitate a few questions. But as Gerald mentioned, we've been at work, and the partners have been at work a long time before this. So we already have a good idea of some questions that we think are out there in the community. So I'm going to ask a few of those to the panel just to get us started, and then if you all have some other questions, we can try to entertain those as well. So my first two questions are kind of two-part, and they're to Jim. Jim, you've been cast as this national voice of experience. What's going on in the country? And so I think it would be helpful to talk a little bit about the examples you're seeing around the country, what you think is going on, and particularly in these other communities where you've done work, what has been the impact of an investment like this?
We'll try to do this quickly here, but on a national level, I mean, it all started, the high-speed rail came back here real quick, and a lot of money was thrown out to the DOTs to try to get this rail started again. And we saw this, and when we looked at this with Forest City, I mean, we have about 30 properties right now that are transit-oriented development properties. And the reason why they're very successful is because of the transit nature of the development itself. So what we have seen, too, in the country now, and it's taken on a new life, and cities are now taking on their own, similar to Atlanta. And on your left here, you see the Denver station, multimodal station that's now going up and is under construction. It's about a $500 million station with development and everything going around it. So you can see the grand central station they're trying to recreate. On the right here is Transbay in San Francisco. It's about $1 billion, a little bit more than $1 billion for this station. So, so cities are doing this. They're starting to build these multimodal stations, anticipating that over time, and like John and Egbert had mentioned, this is going to take 20 to 30 years for this to happen. But the thing what we want to do is make sure that we do it right. I mean, we just don't want to throw a station up, a parking lot, and then hope things will get built. That we actually create the catalysm and the catalytic development around it to really get it going and get it started. So,
all right. So my next question, I think, is to John. I think that in the recent years, I think that most people feel like Atlanta and Georgia in particular, have a lot of challenges in staying economically competitive. And all these folks work around the country, but I was kind of interested in John's perspective on what you think some of the biggest challenges for Atlanta and the region are.
Well, first of all, I'd say that just the fact that you call it a region, by definition, I'm not sure that we've actually acted like a region very effectively to this point. And this project, and the fact that the stakeholders have all come together, may actually be one of the first times I've seen in my 27 years here of watching the region actually operate and act together. I mean, just put it into perspective. Here we sit in the middle of the city of Atlanta. There's 130 plus jurisdictions in this in metropolitan Atlanta. Depending on who you're asked, there's 9 counties, 19 counties, 26 counties, whatever you want to call it. And let's say there's 6 million people. There are just shy of 600,000 people in the city of Atlanta. So that means the city of Atlanta has 10% of the region in population. But we are leading the region in leading the talking points and the discussion and the whole discussion around the heart and in the middle. And so that's an important context of this project. The other thing I think in terms of challenges that fate makes us face is just the whole interface between different components of the region and how we make them all work together to be economically competitive. But I was thinking about this question a little bit, and I said, the ARC probably has it best in their tagline of waste. And that's water is a problem for the whole region, age services, transportation, and education. And those are 4 really big topics that if you really dug into them, and as the ARC does for all of us, and you look at their materials, I think those are the real challenges we face, not only as a city, but as a region itself, and that those aren't unique to us. They're sort of a component and a part of everything around the country, and unfortunately, Atlanta and Georgia may be behind the curve in terms of reacting to those challenges. And so our biggest challenge is getting past the inertia and getting started. And hopefully this kind of dialogue is going to help us propel ourselves past that.
All right, my next question maybe is to Egbert and John. Jim's talked a little bit about some examples around the country and a little bit of lessons learned maybe and what's going on, but I think people out here are really interested to know what's going to be the impact on me, on my neighborhood, on downtown, on my jobs, what's in this for me. And I think particularly we've heard already from a lot of people is, if I get excited about this and I allow myself to get excited about it, I also want to know what my opportunities are in here, but including economic opportunities that may come out of this project.
You asked me 3 or 4 questions in there, Stan. By the way, before I answer that, I do want to echo what John said about ARC, and it gives me a chance to get Doug's name. Doug Hooker was mentioned earlier, but he was late and he wasn't here. He's here now, so Doug, you may want to just be recognized. Doug is the head of ARC, and they're sort of our voice for a lot of this regionalism that we're trying to address. And so I want to echo the applaud to the Georgia Department of Transportation as well as the stakeholders for taking this on, because as John said, the biggest challenge we have is being able to to think regionally but implement locally. And so that's the challenge when you get to a neighborhood discussion. And I think probably if someone asked the question that you asked about how does it affect my neighborhood, my community, communities used broadly that are active, alive, filled with people on the streets are both healthy economically and safer than what we have in Atlanta as a result of areas like the Gulch. Because the Gulch ends up being a gulch, a big divide, so that there's no connectivity between Castleberry Hill and downtown without navigating your way through this big dead zone. There's no connection between whether it's the Atlanta University Center neighborhood or Vine City or English Avenue, the neighborhoods on the west, to downtown without having to cross the Gulch. What ends up happening is you really just don't cross the Gulch. So we have isolated neighborhoods that are severely in need of this knitting or reknitting of the fabric of the city that John talked about. So I think what people should expect in the neighborhoods surrounding the site would be a project that helps to recreate sort of healthy and sustainable local neighborhoods. And the opportunities that come from that are sort of obvious. And, you know, we have examples, whether it's Centennial Place, Techwood becoming Centennial Place, Eastlake becoming the villages at Eastlake. Those are isolated cases. This puts that on steroids because it allows us to have that direct connection that makes the city, the urban core, sort of grow out to embrace a lot of those neighborhoods.
Anything you wanted to add, John?
The what?
I was just asking John if anything.
No, I would just echo the fact that, you know, on a local basis, the opportunities will come about because of that. You know, if you create the right, sustainable, lively neighborhood environment, those opportunities will come there. And I think it's the best way to put it is look at the examples that we have in our own city where these developments of that nature have occurred on a smaller scale, like Centennial Place or Eastlake. In both cases, you had very disconnected areas from the rest of the community at large, and it took great, you know, sort of vision and persistence and patience to make those projects happen. But I think what we got in return is a ripple effect across a much broader area than just those individual projects. And we keep talking about the Gulch and the divide, and it's certainly our impression that by connecting these things together, just doing that in a better way than it is today, will create some of those opportunities that don't exist. Just making it safer and walkable across that divide could, in fact, enhance something on a shorter-term basis. That's certainly not what we intend this to be. We intend it to be something very well planned, implemented, and as I think the best phrase is sustainable in the nature of has longevity. So that's what I look forward to, is the longevity of this opportunity.
Well, I think you all touched on kind of healthy neighborhoods and access and connectivity, but I think a parallel question real quick is, what's on everybody's mind right now is, are there jobs? Does this project generate jobs, and are there opportunities that will be spurred by this project?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. Well, just the project itself, when Jim finally gets it to a point of beginning, which he'll be happy to tell you when he thinks that's going to be. Egbert and I answer that question.
Yeah,
we get ourselves
we
in
want to
trouble.
know that answer too.
Best kept
But,
secret.
there's jobs just in the actual construction and development of this activity. Carmen, somebody over here wants to ask a question? No? Yeah. I would suggest to you that jobs will happen during the actual development, and that the jobs that will be generated will be both, after that will be the excitement of commercial office jobs that will want to be in that area. I mean, we've got a couple of folks that have raised their hand already and said, we have a need and we want to be at this facility, at this new project. We'd love to be able to say we could go build that tomorrow, but we can't. But we know that there is a demand for those types of jobs that will come about. Whenever you relocate a business, jobs are created just by the displacement of folks who don't want to necessarily move to that new location. And then beyond that will be, the new retail and commercial activities that happen in a healthy neighborhood. Those small shop environments, those cafes and boutiques and things that serve the needs of those that are in that area. So those are real-time opportunities we think happen. Bigger scale, this is a project that will attract attention nationally. And people will say, I might want to move my company there.
Okay.
I might want to move my job base there. So that's what we hope happens.
Okay.
I would add one quick comment, and that is that to get the maximum inclusion for local businesses, small businesses, minority and women-owned businesses is not something that happens just because all boats get lifted. So we have to be intentional about designing a strategy for inclusion, which is something we're committed to both in the development phase as well as in the long-term operations phase in terms of who we allow or provide opportunities to as the development goes on.
Well, the freight is very important because as we abandoned the passenger rail and we went to the highway, we actually turned over most of the right-of-ways of the tracks to the freight companies. And that obviously what helped the nation grow because of just the great freight system that we had in our country. Freight needs to move on track long distances, and then the trucks or the truckers pretty much try to pick up everything that's within a 250-mile radius. So, and the reason of that being is that's pretty much a 1 day's work for a truck driver that he can go 250 one way and 250 back, and then you have the freight companies now moving everything across the nation on the tracks. So it's something that, we got to keep it moving, obviously, in order to grow, and that's where it comes very important as the Panama Canal is finished, and Savannah and Norfolk are two major ports on the East Coast that's going to feed a lot of new freight and opportunities this way. And I think Georgia, Atlanta wants to be right there with Savannah. I mean, everything has to come through Atlanta. And we can bring it from Savannah to here. I mean, Atlanta is a port itself with all the freight that comes through here right now. So it's extremely important on how we partner up with the freight companies and how we do the passenger rail with them.
What kind of funding probably has to come together to make a project like this happen?
Right now, there's a lot of creative funding programs that are happening out there, and Denver actually used one right now. There is federal funds that are out there that are available, matching funds locally, but what we're looking at is somewhat of a new model that kind of takes way I like to put it is the taxpayer gets their money back. It's not just going to be free money given to developers. It's going to be money that's going to be recreated from the development opportunities that occur around the station itself. I mean, a good example is that if you take a freeway and when they put an interchange up, all the developers came in there and they developed on all four corners of the freeway. What I like to say now is the developers didn't pay for that interchange. Now they can pay for that interchange, and they can help contribute from the economics that are created from those developments to help finance the infrastructure and the operations of the station itself.
And I was going to add that there are a lot of tools that are already in place. There's something called tax increment financing, where in effect, by virtue of the development, you're creating new property tax revenues from the development that gets built. There is a way to finance that increment in taxes with current dollars so that those dollars are available for you to do the improvements that are needed today. So that's one of the tools. You're basically taking some of the value you're going to create and convert it into current dollars so that those dollars are there available to fund the investment. And there are a host of about a half a dozen tools that are proven, tried and true, that we expect to employ on this project.
What happens from here? What's the process going forward, Jim? And what are the opportunities for people to be involved? And kind of what ultimately I think is on people's mind is, if I buy into this project, when might I see something happen at the earliest?
There is a NEPA process going on, which is the National Environmental Protection Act. And it's really to make sure that there's no impacts, everything's done right. And we as developers want to make sure that it is done right. The nice thing about this process we're doing right now is the master development team, which we don't have any stake at the game as far as developments going on. We're neutral, we work for the owner, and that's all the stakeholders from the public all the way up to GDOT and everybody else that you've heard about. And what we want to do is the NEPA process, we actually starting to work on some alternates right now, alternate locations, maybe, is it a single type building, double building, how these buildings come together. And that'll be part of the scoping document that they'll issue, and there'll be a scoping meeting with the public sometime in April. And to try to get the scoping document completed by June, which really identifies the scope of the project and where it's going. Sometime in July, we want to come back on those alternates that are presented in the April meeting and vet those alternates out a little bit more, hear more from the public of what they think, their suggestions. And then by late fall this year, we want to try to move into a preferred alternate. And if we can do that, then first of next year, they'll issue what they call the DEIS, which is a draft environmental impact statement. It'll go through the FTA, and sometime by the end of 2013, hopefully we get a approval that there's no impacts, preferred alternates picked, financing that's in place, or a mechanism for the model of the financing is in place, to what we can call phase 2 could start, and that would actually be the implementation of the MMPT station itself. So that could start as early as 2014 happening. What can everybody do? We're trying to go around and talk with the stakeholders, talk with the public. We'll have numbers that are available. I know Urban Collage will have ways of getting hold of us. We want to hear your ideas. We want to hear your thoughts, and we want to try to incorporate it into the process.
You started to allude to this, Jim, but I've got several questions here. I sense a little cynicism out there about political will and what it's going to take to lift up this project and to see it implemented, and who has to be involved, and whose support do we have to garner, and how do we garner the support of people who may not be immediately downtown?
And this is in all seriousness. As citizens, you want to know how to be involved, and you want to create the political will. We all have a vote.
We all have to get together now and figure out how to do it together. We just can't do it individually anymore. So that's very important. The other is that cities tend to think, well, we did that project, so now we can stop. Cities can't stop. They got to keep going. And they got to keep planning, they got to keep looking at the future, and they got to look at the 20 to 30 years down the road, because as congestion and growth occurs, these are going to become more challenging down the road and it'll become more expensive. And today, if we can resolve them, God bless us, we can go forward and do that.
Well, I hope that you all will join me in thanking the panel. But like I said, you can also come up and ask more questions, but could you thank them for the... So, as I mentioned, this is just the beginning of a dialogue we want to have with this city and this region over the next several months. This is the process Jim started to allude to. You get kind of some of the general milestones. This summer is very important as we start to look at alternatives and moving towards a preferred alternative in the fall, and then next year looking at how would you get this done, the approvals, et cetera, that are necessary, and that NEPA process. And I wanted to acknowledge our colleague Brock Haig with HNTB, and I think there's several members of his team who you can also, they've got a lot of information, fact sheets, and other things that they've already prepared that'll be at one of the tables back there. But really, that's this NEPA process, which is about judging and evaluating kind of what is the impact and what's the public good here of this project, and as we move forward. So we would like you to do three things. We'd like you to come up and ask any questions or fill out comment cards. If you would like an answer to a question, you feel more comfortable writing it down. If you'll write it down and give us contact information, we'll try to get back to you. If you've got a question for the panel or one of the team with the name tags, we'll be out back in the gallery here to answer questions. But we'd like to offer for you all to do two more things, which is, this is a rare opportunity. Think big. Think big about what this could be for our city and what could happen in the Gulch. And so we have a little graffiti board out there. We'd like you to maybe give us your idea of what the vision is of the Gulch. And the other thing about a planning process like this is, while there can be a lot of positive change, oftentimes you want to make sure change doesn't overrun things that are worth preserving. So we also want to start asking that question of you all tonight too, particularly physically and economically, and about this special place that is downtown and the immediate neighborhoods. We ask you to do an exercise, and folks can help you out, but help us start to understand things you would like to see change. It could be a traffic light that really annoys you every morning, or it could be some major issue of abandoned property or something you wish was changed. But also tell us the things you don't want changed in this process, things that are important to hold on to, maybe that are important to our history, maybe important to you. So we'd like you to kind of do some exercises in a more ad hoc way as you leave. But as I mentioned, please feel free to come up. These gentlemen have graciously volunteered their time, and we want to hear from you. And I think it's great for you to have kind of direct one-on-one discussions with them if you would like to. So thank you all for coming. I wanted to quickly say that the next event you should look for, and there should be information coming out, is a series of meetings. There'll be similar meetings to talk about the scoping and the alternatives of the project. I think we'll be able to bring, as a team, we're going to bring a lot more information or start to understand a little bit more of the technical considerations about how this might work. So we'll hopefully be able to share those. And here's contact information. We need to get our Twitter and Facebook page up there now, so if you're interested, that's also a good place where you can get notices. Go to the website. We're going to post this video, so if you have folks who weren't able to come tonight, we will be posting this, we hope, by the beginning of next week to make sure if people want to see this. Derek is our captain, so you can always feel free to contact GDOT and Derek as well. Thank you all very much for coming, and we look forward to seeing you at the next meeting.